So we're joined with Steve Endacott here to discuss DeepSeek R1 and find out a bit more about it, dispel some of the myths that keep popping up on LinkedIn and in the news and everywhere you've probably seen. Steve is the chairman of Neural River, been in the AI industry for the past few years, and wrote an article today about R1. So Steve, do you want to tell us a few of your thoughts around R1?
R1 is not a myth. There's no myth about the shareholder value that's disappeared out of the US stock market in the last 48 hours because of the launch of DeepSeek and R1. So, no matter what you techies think, the city think you're wrong and think it marks the days of much cheaper AI and also the ability to diversify and not have all the power in the computing hands of the big American giants. So, my article basically said that R1 is torpedoed, a bit like Pearl Harbor, the American fleet of AI giants, and their share prices are going down and they have to compete harder.
Okay. So in your article, and obviously there you've spoken about it being cheaper. What does cheaper than what in your mind? And I think that this is a myth that's kind of going on from multiple angles of cheaper, and there's some truth in it, and there's some misconceptions in it as well. So cheaper than what?
Well, the foundations of any charging basis is what does it cost you to train the model? So if the Chinese claim, and yeah, we can't ratify that, that they've trained the model for about $5 to $7 million compared with $100 million, which is what we hear is OpenAI is spending. Yeah, that's 10 times the cost of actually creating a model. So irrespective of what you use it for, that will mean it will be cheaper moving forward. And I know they've only launched a one part of the R1 program so far, but the Chinese are cheap and they will follow up with other cheap products and people will use them outside of America. The American government will put up a blanket ban and try to charge you extra and try to stop it, yeah, and it ain't going to work.
Well, so the Americans have already put on restrictions of GPU sales to China, which is partially the reasoning for this, many experts are claiming. They're saying that you've restricted it so heavily, they've looked for creative solutions to go and train this on the cheap with less access to GPUs. So the restrictions have caused more innovation, which is really awesome. I really like that. Um, but then when we look at the actual cheap side of it, obviously we're going off of what the Chinese have said about the cost of it. We're not factoring in the cost of gathering the data, getting the data cleansed and sorted. We're not talking about anything before that training part of it, which can be a massive cost of training a model. With
Jeremy, is it times the training? Call it 25 million. That's still four times cheaper than 100 million. I
yes,
don't believe you techies. I believe this is a game changing, cost reducing tool that will allow more people in the UK to use cheaper chips to host their own hosting and rather than be reliant on £1 billion data centers from the US. So I think the US have suddenly lost control in an area where they thought they had complete control because they had complete control over the compute power. And that's the game changer, I think.
agree and disagree. Agree from the fact, yes, it opens it up to more people being able to actually start to create new foundational models at a cheaper rate. But at the end of the day, those chips are still NVIDIA chips. You cannot train a model on an AMD chip, and it's unlikely anytime in the future you will be able to, or near future at least, unless AMD somehow massively surpass CUDA in the next few months. It's
So
not going to happen.
what's the price
So
of the cheap chip they're using? Because it's the same manufacturer, but I understood one was much cheaper than the other. So what's the price differential between those chips?
it's more about where they're hosting them as well, and you
No,
never
ask
buy
a
these chips
specific
out.
question.
You don't buy these
Ask a
GPUs outright.
specific question. How much cheaper are they? I'm
So
focused
I
on the
believe it's
price at the moment.
A100s compared to like T4s, like a 10 grand difference per GPU. But that's not the point of it. It's still NVIDIA GPUs and it's server rented at the same time. That doesn't mean, like, NVIDIA stock has obviously fallen drastically. But what it actually means is, yes, that power is not in the hands of 4 or 5 big companies like Microsoft, like OpenAI, like Anthropic that are using thousands upon thousands of GPUs. It now means it can be done on a much smaller scale by a lot more businesses. So I fully believe GPUs will still be utilized long term at the exact same rate, just with a couple hundred companies instead of a couple four, and overall using less to train the same quality.
So I think you agree with me then. So that basically this ability to use cheaper CPUs means that smaller businesses can build their data centers cost effectively, and we're
Yes.
spreading the power away from the four big American giants who looked up until days ago that they were going to dominate the entire marketplace. And
Yes,
that
so
is
I
why,
agree with that, but I'm saying it's a market overreaction on Nvidia stock and similar stocks because I think long term the usage is still going to be the same and the actual requirements is still going to be the same on a large scale. I just think it's going to be more diverse with the amount of players in the field.
Joe, I mean, notice respect, you're a techie. Do you work in the city and the city are reacting to something it says you can do the same thing with chips that probably cost a tenth of the price of the full price chips? No wonder Nvidia's stock is crashing because obviously they're not going to sell millions of their expensive chips if they expected to. So I
No,
just
nobody's.
think
It's,
this is
it's
wrong.
never been a case of you can't do it with cheaper chips.
Well,
OpenAI could do this with A100s, but it's quicker with T4s or Blackwell architecture. I could if I had a million 3080s in my computer, I could do it. It would just take longer and
so
not be
Jeremy,
as efficient.
this is
OpenAI and American businesses have access to these faster chips that cost more. In return, they do it quicker. It's
yes.
it's never it's never been a question of can a lesser chip do it. It's all about speed.
Yeah, but
But
what's the relativity of that speed? So I'm trying to take a commercial angle, you're taking a pure tech angle. Yeah, bluntly, price matters. Cost of delivered services matter. So what is the price differential compared to the speed differential? Yeah, can you wait that extra couple of milliseconds? Can you wait that extra half a second potentially for your answers if it's 10, 20 times cheaper? You've got to look at that as a customer reaction because people don't like buying expensive toys. Yeah,
I
they
think
want
the other
they
thing
can't afford
that's the other thing that's freaked out the market as well in general is a Chinese competitor coming into the space. And I think a
hallelujah.
lot of
Good.
hmm?
Why do we love America and we hate China? Where's
Well,
the
I,
logic?
I I think that this again is why I think it's an overreaction here. China isn't new to this space. Gwen, for like 6 to 12 months, has been high up in every single leaderboard in the top 10 constantly, made by Alibaba in China. But no one's cared. DeepSeek just happens to have hit around the same benchmarks as OpenAI, so it's towards the top of the leaderboards. So now it's big news. But Gwen has consistently been one of the highest performing models.
Yeah, but they didn't tell people how much cheaper it was to train it. They didn't tell much people how much cheaper it was to operate because they're using cheaper chips. So basically, that's what the reaction from the market is saying is, okay, guys, the big American stocks, we thought you were the only ones who could do this. Yeah, it now looks like you've got billions on your balance sheet that you're going to have to write off because all this training models that you spent hundreds of millions on, somebody else has done for 5 to 10 million. So that's a dramatic change in the landscape that changes the valuation of businesses, and I believe opens up the doors to smaller players becoming players in this marketplace. The big question is, and I come back to this: why do we hate China? Well, we hate China because we think they're nicking all our information. They're run by a communist government who are out to kill us. What a load of rubbish, right? You've got Trump in America. God, look at him, right? In America, you've got guns that you can freely buy, and they regularly slaughter hundreds of kids in schools. But that's a great democracy compared with China, where they've killed people in Tiananmen Square, and we should never forgive them for it. Can we just have a reality check and look at the global powers and say, right, as the UK, we should be independent of America, we should be independent of China, and we should use the cheapest products to our advantage, and we should be an AI superpower based on cheap chips. Cheap chips.
Now,
Buy them at your supermarket.
I completely agree with basically everything you said there. I want to go back to your post you said earlier about 21 times cheaper running the model. Which there's some elements of truth in that, but
It
it's on a
came from the New
compa-
York, Jeremy, it came from the New York Times.
yeah.
If it's
So
wrong, I was wrong to believe the New York Times.
no, I'm I'm
I
I'm,
have
I'm
to
not I'm
believe
not
you,
saying it's
Jeremy,
wrong,
because
but
you're
I
obviously
think
more qualified.
everyone is making the wrong comparison. Um, like so many videos I've seen on LinkedIn are looking like coding challenges using R1 and then comparing it to 4.0. It's like apples and oranges, not the same thing. So I think it's really important we discuss what R1 is and what the direct comparisons are. Because there's two types of language models that you have in mainstream language at the moment. You've got a conversational model, and you've got a reasoning model. Now, what most people are used to is a conversational model, like GPT-4, like GPT 3.5, where you type something, you get a response, type something, get a response. Now, they're really powerful. That's what most people use for like writing blogs, writing articles, writing LinkedIn posts. Now, R1 is not a conversational model. It's a reasoning model. The only thing OpenAI has similar is O1 and O3. They skipped O2, who knows why. O1 is publicly available and very expensive, like ridiculously expensive. O3 isn't publicly available. It's internal use only at OpenAI, with some researchers having access, and is ungodly expensive. Like, ridiculous amounts of money to run a model of that power. Now, R1 compares to O1. They're very similar on benchmarks. Overall, O1 from OpenAI is just about winning, but marginally. And yes, R1 is significantly cheaper than O1. But it's still more expensive than GPT-4o.
Which is a conversational model, so you can't compare it to that because you're not comparing Apple.
But most people are. And DeepSeek has gone really popular in the App Store. It's now #1 in the App Store in the US, which is crazy. Nobody, I'd say 99% of people, have zero purpose for a reasoning model. Now, what a reasoning model is a model that can effectively think. It's trying to solve complex problems. So you'd use it for complex coding challenges. You'd use it for complex mathematical problems. You wouldn't use it to write your blog on why asparagus is the next superfruit. It's completely pointless. You use a standard conversational AI language model for that sort of content.
So Jeremy, what you're saying, and I probably agree with you here, is the market is not overreacting, because the market is reacting to the cost of training and the cost of chips. Consumers are overreacting because why are they rushing to the Apple Store to get access to something that's no better than the product they've already got at no higher price? I couldn't agree more. That is not the point of my blog. I didn't put that in the blog. I said this is torpedoing the large companies because it's destroying confidence in their balance sheet. It's destroying confidence in their methodology. And it's showing it can be done a lot cheaper, which is going to have earth-shaking reverberations around the AI world. That's what I focused on. That's what I believe. The fact
let's talk why it's cheaper.
The fact that DeepSeek haven't launched a conversational model yet.
No, they have. It's fine. It's average.
Okay. And do you think it's going to end up being a lot cheaper because they can train it and run it on fewer chips? Because that's what they're claiming. Do you believe
they're not claiming that with their chat models? They're claiming that only with their reasoning models. They have done a hefty discount on their chat models at the moment. So right now, they are cheaper than most standard out there. They've said their discount on them will be expiring, putting it roughly at the same price. When we look at chat models that are readily available at the moment, it scores about 10th on the benchmark lists. So it's kind of slap bang in the middle of the mainstream models. Most of OpenAI's main models are beating it by a good way in the benchmarks. So it's not one that most people are considering when it comes to chat.
So the answer to your point is consumers are overreacting. Consumers are grabbing hold of DeepSeek on the misconception that it's a better chat model and it's cheaper, right? That's not what's caused the reaction in the city. So we're talking about two different points in two different models, I'm afraid.
So let's talk about why R1 is actually cheaper to run than O1. And they're named so similar, it makes it confusing. But O1, OpenAI, R1, DeepSeek. So the reason it's cheaper is it comes down to model parameters. So parameters, think of it as how much data the model is trained on. The more parameters, the bigger and more vast the world understanding it has, and the higher chance it is it's going to be able to solve different problems. We don't know the amount of parameters in O1. We can presume it's probably similar to DeepSeek, but we don't know for sure. DeepSeek is about 600 billion parameters. Now, the bigger a model is, the harder it is to get the response from it. You need more GPU power to power that model. Nobody is going to have a GPU in their PC to run it locally of a 600 billion parameter model, you will need like A100s, T4s, and it will need to run in the cloud. And that's how it works for OpenAI. Now, what DeepSeek have done that's really clever is they're not using most of the parameters for questioning. They will refine what parameters are needed and only end up using like 60 billion parameters of the 600 billion parameters. So they're able to use a tenth of the processing power needed by looking at that smaller data set, which is a really awesome development and one of the best things that has actually come out of this, which not enough people are actually speaking about. That is the really awesome development here, and the best bit is of it, it's open source. There's research papers available on this now. So it means more people within the US can start using this methodology to create these larger parameter models and start to make it more cost effective. So it feels like OpenAI will probably be doing something like this soon because it makes sense. And if they're able to do similar on O3, that is game changing. O3 is scoring about 83% on one of the best AGI benchmarks right now. O1 is about 20%, so DeepSeek's probably about 19%. So if OpenAI are able to use this new research on O3 and get effectively the same sort of results, that is incredibly powerful, and we're nearing AGI at that point.
So I think this is really fascinating. So what you're telling me is the Chinese, because they've made it open source, and presumably they've done that due to fear of American sanctions and having data transferred to China and held in China, and Europe's reaction to that and America's reaction to that, have made their product open source, which makes it copyable by the Americans. So for the first time ever, rather than the Chinese copying the Americans or the English and everything else, it'll be the other way around. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, but yeah, I think the open source landscape in language models at the moment and AI in general is really interesting. You've got 5 or 6 of the top language models out there right now. So you've got OpenAI dominating it mostly with O1 and 4.0. Obviously, OpenAI, open is in the name. They closed off a few years back after GPT-3, so we don't know what's in those models. Claude from Anthropic, very closed off, always been.
So they're called OpenAI, but they're not open.
No, we've not seen a proper
Great
research
name.
paper with any value for quite a while from them.
What a great name then.
Yeah,
OpenAI,
it's
but we're
perfect.
not open. We're keeping it all to our greedy little selfish selves.
Yep.
Okay.
Then Anthropic, that tends to score pretty high on standard benchmarks. They've never really released anything open ever. Then you've got Google and Gemini, pretty closed off. But then you've got Llama and from Meta, like Llama 3.2 consistently scoring high in benchmarks. And you've got variations of Llama from Dracares that are also scoring high. Then you've got Gwen from Alibaba, and now you've got DeepSeek. And these are all models that are performing fantastically, often comparing to the top models from Anthropic, from OpenAI, from Google, sometimes beating them, sometimes being slightly less. And these are completely open. And that's really
So
great.
who's going to win then? So is this Betamax versus VHS? I know you're a bit young for that analogy, but in the old days, mate, we used to go to the shops and we had to take off a VHS TV of a video recorder of a film or a Betamax.
In university, I actually had to write a paper about that. So
Okay,
that
so
one I know.
which one of these is going to win? Will OpenAI and their closed structures beat, the open access of the other guys, and which allows more programmers and a bigger range of programs to use the tools? Who's going to win?
If it's a straight up LLM race, I think there's plenty of room for competition. If we never hit AGI, then there will be multiple forms to go through because everyone's going to want the open source.
AGI, of course, we're going to hit AGI.
Not of course. Not. I don't believe for a
we are.
second it's a guarantee. I'm very hopeful we do, but that's
Yeah, but
not
if you
a
see
guarantee.
what's happened in the last 2 years and the acceleration rate of AI and acceleration rate of development, and you're a youngster and you're doubting AGI, I just find that incredible. That you
I'm doubting AGI through the transformer architecture that we've got in place right now.
Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. We've just seen a radical shift from the Chinese in DeepSeek, just a little bit of radical thinking to use cheaper CPUs and not hold as much data. Do you not think the large language models are going to change like that as well? I can't understand why they've got to boil all this data down into a large language model and can't update it on a daily, monthly basis because it's complicated, they tell us. Yeah,
Because
all got to change.
I don't think that it's impossible to hit AGI. I think it's becoming more and more unlikely that we can hit AGI with the transformer architecture, and there are plenty of well-regarded academic researchers saying the same thing.
And do
I
you know
think it
who's going to solve that? Computers. Because if you read the releases from China, it's computers programming themselves that's actually led to this leap in actual ability.
yeah.
So computers will work out the best way of doing it and the most logical way of doing it. And
And I'm
it's
not
all
saying
going
I
to happen
disagree with
very
that. I'm
quickly.
saying the fundamental transformer architecture that reportedly OpenAI is mainly focused on, and they're not putting too much focus elsewhere. Similar with Anthropic, similar with Meta, they're all in on the transformer architecture. But most leading researchers in this area that are academics doubt that transformer architecture is what will get us to AGI. It needs something different. It looked promising early on, but it's hitting its sort of thresholds and not surpassing that. O3 looks like maybe there's a chance. That's the first thing in the past 12 months that has made me think, okay, maybe LLMs could get us to that. And because it's scoring so high in those benchmarks. But I'm still skeptical that the transformer architecture is the way to go on it.
I wouldn't have a clue because I'm not a techie. I just listen to this result and I see prices tumbling in stocks. I see prices of access to AI tumbling. I see computers reinventing how computers work. And I see that is the future.
And I see that as they've cut the cost, they've not improved the output.
I
So
don't
that's not AGI.
care.
We're not.
I'm a commercial person. The output of AI, we haven't even started implementing that into our daily lives yet. What we've currently got is earth shattering, but loads of people don't even know it's there. Neural voice, being able to scale up 0 to 1,000 agents in a second to handle every customer query you want at a fraction of the cost of a human being, to be open 24/7, is earth shattering. But we've
Yeah.
not even implemented that yet. We haven't even got into 1, 2, 3% of the market. So there's so much to be done with what we've currently got available from AI. Don't worry about the next step. Worry about the cost of what we currently got. The cheaper it get, the quicker it will get adopted.
And I'm not disagreeing at all. I completely agree with everything you just said, but that's a different point from are we on the path to AGI?
I agree with
And
you.
that's the point where
My point on the path to AGI, because I don't care about your technical bullshit, is that computers have shown that they can make themselves more efficient with the DeepSeek release, and I think that will continue. And I think computers will look at large language models and say, how do we structure this to make it a lot quicker and more efficient? Human beings won't.
I think that's very possible. I think humans also have a lot of ingenuity, and it may well come from someone like Ilya Skutskova trying something completely different. Who knows?
Completely agree. And that's why I like to see that cheaper chips mean more players can play against the big guys. You don't have to have a £1 billion computer center to actually run an AI business or an AI large language model. That's what we've seen coming out of China. That's why I'm excited. So
Yep.
put to one side all your comparisons. Don't care. It's cheaper. It's easy to run. More people playing the game. It's exciting.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's exciting, but I just think there's too many people focusing on the wrong part of it.
Yeah, well, you're techie. Yeah, we're non-techies. And coming back to it, you aren't qualified as much as the city players are to understand the impact on the share prices of those stocks. They see something that you don't. Consumer-wise, I agree. It may be a consumer overreaction because why they rush in to open a tool that's no better than the ones they've already got. But I can see why that confusion occurs. The
I'm
fundamentals
not
are it's
qualified to
cheaper.
make the financial decisions on it, but a lot of them aren't qualified and are speculators, so they're not qualified to understand the technical side of it, which is also a huge impact of it. They're
And you're,
speculators.
and you're probably right.
So that's why I'm saying I think it will bounce back, and I'm not concerned.
I think it will bounce back at a lot lower cost. And I think the ratchet of price pressure has just been really applied to the American supergiants who've got to get their act together and become cheaper. If they don't, because the Chinese product is open source, it will come out of China, be used by developers in UK and other European countries, and we will compete against
Yep.
the US. If the US doesn't allow China to do it, because they've got this massive war they want to launch on China for no particular reason, right? Apart from it's good for Donald Trump and put up the barriers of MAGA, etc. It's bullshit. We should work with all of it.
Yep. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. It's been good to discuss it.
Thank you very much.
See you later.